All right. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Power Motoryacht podcast. I'm your host today, Editor-in-Chief Dan Harding. And today, special guest at a special time. The magazine we just went to press on is the first ever Great Loop issue. And it's one me and the team are exceptionally proud of. And we've had a bit of a looper stretch right now. We've had a series of 3 very fascinating Great Loop conquerors. Well, actually one, Jackie Albina, is still on the loop, but we had Robert Ewens, Peter Hages. So today we're bringing on the director of the American Great Loop Association, Kim Russo, herself a looper. Kim, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, no, thanks for being on. I thought this would be a perfect opportunity. I've been a longtime podcast listener of yours. I thought this would be a great opportunity to kind of take a step back, talk about the loop, talk about what feels like the Great Loop is enjoying a little bit of a moment right now. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just a couple of these people I'm seeing across social media. But do you feel that way? And you've been absorbed in the Great Loop for a while. Does it feel like it's having a moment?
Yeah, I've been the director for about 10 years, and in some ways it does feel like it's having a moment. Robert Ewan's story, certainly resonated with a lot of people on social media. So that became a big thing this summer, brought a lot of notoriety to the Great Loop.
Yeah.
So from that respect, yes. That said, we had 270 people complete the Great Loop last year, or I should say 270 boats. So most of them had 2 people aboard.
Right.
But so it's been gaining in popularity really post-COVID. But yes, there is certainly some focus on some of the other ways you can do the Great Loop, let's say. We've never been, at AGLCA, our association, has never really focused on the record setters because everyone's loop is an amazing adventure and journey for them. What we encourage is for people to do it in a way that works for them. So more recently, it has been tackled much faster than it has in the past. And there are some who will say, well, what can you possibly see if you do the loop in less than a month? But again, we encourage people to do it in a way that works for them, as long as they're remaining safe, following all of the regulations on the waterway and being safe and courteous boaters. So yes, it's having a moment in terms of, I think the eyes have been opened by a whole new demographic of people, which is great.
That's so interesting. What do you think the ripple effect of some of these adventures might be? Do you feel like, does it maybe in some way seem less daunting? It's like, well, this guy did it in a John boat and this guy did it in 12 days. I've been boating my whole life. I shouldn't be so scared. Do you feel like, I don't know, do you feel like that might be a factor going forward?
Perhaps. I think it takes a heck of a lot more preparation to do it in something like a John boat. And you've spoken to Robert, he'll tell you. And in fact, one of the things I loved that he said when we had him on our podcast is when he hears people saying, well, great, I'm going to hop in my John boat and I'm going to do it too. His response is, you really have to earn that. He had a ton of experience in the John boat and in other types of boating before he got in his boat and started the Great Loop. So I actually think trying to do it for a record is actually, to me, a little bit more daunting than being able to take it one short leg at a time and have the time to plan that next leg while you're exploring what there is to see on shore in that particular place.
No, that's an interesting point. Do you worry when you, especially in the Robert Ewens case, do you worry about other people that are going to try to copy that or try to go after a record and maybe not do it in the safest way?
It does worry me, both safe and courteous. Even with slower loopers who are, doing it on a trawler, perhaps, we often hear, well, this person waked me. They were flying your burgee. AGLCA is all about safe and courteous boating. So it worries me from a perspective, are, people who are trying to go fast, are they being safe for themselves and for the other people on the waterway? And are they being courteous and following the regulations? And after talking with Robert, I was very well convinced that he was doing things right. But, that said, this is kind of a new thing to try and break the speed record. AGLCA has been in existence since 1999. And the first real efforts that I remember of people trying to do it as fast as they could probably started, maybe 2 years ago.
Wow. I didn't realize that. That's interesting. So you mentioned, was it in this past year, 270 boats completed the loop?
In 2024, yes.
In 2024.
Yeah, we don't have
How
a
is that?
stat yet for 2025.
Right. That makes sense. How is that? How is that tracking? How is that tracking pre-COVID, COVID today?
So pre-COVID, it was about half that. Um,
Really
in the
interesting.
heart of COVID, it actually went down pretty significantly. Even though boating was a very good way to isolate during COVID, a lot of
Yeah.
people are doing the loop because of what they'll see and do along the way. So if everything in
Right.
the town and all the restaurants were closed, it wasn't quite the experience people wanted.
That
The
makes sense.
US Canadian border was also closed to boaters for one full season and most of the next season. So we definitely saw a drop in those numbers during COVID. Post COVID, like a lot of things with boating, it really kind of took off.
Mm,
So I think in 2023, I want to say it was somewhere around 240 boats. And in
wow.
2022, I want to say it was just a little over 200. So it's still tracking up a little bit, but not as substantially as immediately post COVID.
You can play dumb for a second.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that jump to?
So I think it's a few things. First of all, I think there's this general feeling that at post COVID that people want to catch up with that they might have missed. Travel is up substantially since COVID. You just never know when something could happen that just completely derails your plans. So people are deciding, let's do it now, let's not wait. But I think that is coupled with technology. We have more and more people doing it younger because they are able to work aboard. And they found out during COVID that they could work effectively from somewhere other than their office.
Right.
So it's not a huge leap to then take that and move it to a boat. We're also
Right.
seeing more families on the loop because very similarly, they found out they could educate their kids anywhere. And, what an experience for kids to have the education of visiting where history happened instead of just reading about it in school. So,
Yeah.
for some people, homeschool worked great or virtual school worked really well. Again, it's not a huge leap to move that onto a boat and just really kind of not put this off until retirement, but do it at a younger age.
Hmm. It's yeah. That's such an interesting point. If we forgive me because we kind of just like leapt into this. So
Yeah.
for the few boaters that I think most of the Power Modi audience is well familiar with the Great Loop. But if you don't mind, the quick elevator pitch. What is the Great Loop? And the number one question, like, what is the average length of the
Okay.
loop?
So the Great Loop is about a 6,000-mile waterway adventure. You cruise on
Mhm.
your own boat at your own pace. It is mostly a protected trip. So, in a nutshell, it follows the East Coast up into the Chesapeake Bay and into the Hudson River, through New York, up the Hudson River, which through the canals gives you access to the Great Lakes.
Right.
From the Great Lakes, you'll meander your way through them to Chicago and then work your way down the inland rivers to the Gulf of Mexico. Kind of hug the coastline of Florida for the most part, and that kind of closes the circle. So, about 6,000 miles. The average looper boat is between 40 and 41 feet. It has not deviated much from that in recent
Amazing,
years.
right?
So, I think there's a couple of perceptions. I think one is there's a lot more, unique and different, but also smaller boats like a John boat or a kayak out there. And that is true. I think there's another perception that, oh my gosh, all these loopers are in 60 footers. Yes, I think there are more bigger boats too. I think the outliers have increased, but
Yeah.
over the years we tracked that average and it has remained within a few inches between 40 and
Amazing.
41 feet. So that is still the typical average size looper boat.
Wow. So what? Again, kind of playing dumb a little bit, but what is it that attracts people to the loop in the first place?
I think it's the adventure of it. I mean, that seems to be the word that resonates,
Yeah.
particularly for somebody who loves boating. I mean, we have a lot of people brand new to boating that hear about the Great Loop and excited about it as an adventure. But for
Yeah.
somebody who really loves boating, it's just a fabulous lifestyle, and it's a
Yeah.
fabulous way to see so much water and
Yeah.
so many unique places that it's completely different when you arrive in a town on your boat than it is if you drive there. Completely different feel. You tend to see different things, meet different people. And almost without exception, when people finish the loop, they come back and say the best part was the people they met. Other
Yeah.
loopers, other boaters, but even the locals in the
Right.
towns. It's just kind of a fascinating, somebody sees your boat that has Houston, Texas on the back of it, and you're
Oh,
in
wow.
Canada,
Yeah.
and they want,
Yeah.
they want to hear the story.
I think that's well said. I really kind of had a revelation or a realization, well, I guess both, in putting together our most recent issue and talking to hearing Robert's story and Peter's and Jackie's that so much of me thinks it's the challenge itself that people are craving more and more. I feel like, today we're kind of and I wrote this in my column, we're kind of in this Uber Eats, Instacart, kind of Netflix world that I think people just crave the challenge to go somewhere else, experience different, the Great Lakes and the challenge of, the inland waterways. And so I think you think that kind of jives with your answer of wanting that adventure, right?
Absolutely. And, that's kind of one of the really intriguing things about the Great Loop. It is challenging enough to still be an accomplishment when you finish it, but
Right,
it is
right.
not so arduous that somebody who's retired can't handle it.
That's interesting.
But
Yeah,
it is
I
an
like that.
accomplishment. Uh,
Definitely.
because there are challenges daily.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
boating, right? You
Voted.
cannot control every piece of it. So there's going to be some challenges along the way. But even for those who are in retirement, approaching retirement, it is a great way to keep both your mind and body active. You
Yeah,
are actively doing something. And, some people's vision, if they haven't boated a lot, is that, perhaps they'll be sipping Chardonnay and
yeah,
watching
yeah,
the world go by. You're busy. And a lot of
yeah,
people say, I don't know
yeah.
what I do all day, but I am busy all day.
I like that.
And it's very true. And there are challenges, but if there were no challenges, it would not be an accomplishment to finish it.
That's well said. I think, yeah. Well, you touched on it briefly, but I feel like anytime you have a conversation with somebody about the loop or the loop comes up, the very next question is, well, what's the perfect boat for the loop? What is the best boat for the loop? It's just, and you've addressed this, I know, many times in your podcast, but yeah, I did want to get your perspective. I know famously there is an air draft restriction, but
Yeah.
outside of that, for the millions wandering around the world, what do you, Kim Russo, think is the perfect Great Loop boat?
I'm going to say the one I am sitting on.
Well, that's a good
Because
answer.
for a lot of people, the best boat is the one that they already have. I'm on a
Good
Silverton
point.
410 Motoryacht right now. My story is a little bit different than many because I did not select this boat. I did not pick this boat. My fiance and he already had the boat when we met. So I spent probably a good first half of my loop with envy of all of the other boats, all of the other features, everything everybody other boat had.
Uh-huh.
And along the way, I realized I love this boat. This boat is perfect.
Nice.
Both the size, the layout for the two of us,
Yeah.
but also because he's had it for 10 years. He knows every inch of the boat. He knows what he's just fixed. He knows what's probably going to be the next thing to break.
Right.
And there's a lot to be said for that. If we were
Totally.
to, and we have discussed it many times, selling this and getting something different. And a lot of times it comes down to, the devil, boating.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so ours is a very average looper boat.
Mhm.
Silverton 410, so true length overall is probably more like 46 feet, but we're in that average looper range, 2 staterooms, split head. So it's convenient. It's perfect for two. It's perfect for the two of us. Impossible question for me to answer for anybody else, but it's been done in everything from a personal watercraft or a kayak or a John boat on up to, the longest boat I know of that finished it was a 94 footer that did it. I think they finished in 2023.
Oh my
But, and
gosh.
anything in between that, as long as it is seaworthy and
Yeah.
as long as you will be comfortable aboard it for the time you intend to spend,
Yeah.
then it's a suitable Great Loop boat and it can clear the bridges. As you mentioned, there are some height restrictions, really no width restrictions. If you have a very beamy catamaran, for example, you may not be able to do some of the route choices, but you can still complete the Great Loop.
And what is that? What is it? Can you remind me of that air draft requirement? Is it 20 something, 24?
So
No.
per the charts, the lowest bridge on the Great Loop that has no alternate way around it
Yeah.
is at mile 300.5 on the Illinois Waterway. It is a bit outside of Chicago.
Okay.
It is charted at 19.6. I have had boats with a 20-foot air draft that told me they were able to squeak under. If you're in the market
That's
for a Great
stressful.
Loop boat, I would probably go for something that meets the charted air draft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything else being equal. The width, as I said, doesn't matter as much what the beam is. The narrowest lock on the Trent Severn Waterway in Canada, which is a highlight for a lot of people, is
Sure.
23 feet. So some of our
Okay.
catamarans take a different route instead of
Got
doing
it.
the Trent Severn because they wouldn't fit through there. We say you probably shouldn't draw a whole lot more than 5 or so feet. You're just creating additional challenges. It's a low
Sure.
water year this year on the inland rivers. It was also in 2022. If you draw more than 5 or so feet, there may be some marinas or anchorages you can't get into. And then the Trent Severn is, again, maintained to 6 feet. So if you draw more than about 5, you're going to struggle there.
That's a really great reminder, and I love your answer of the best boat is the boat you have. Jackie
Yeah.
Aldina she really echoed that as well. She had a 25-foot Rossboro, and she was comfortable with it. It was she grew up with outboard boats, and it fit her. She knew she could fix everything. So I think so often people get hung up on that. Well, I have to get a loop boat. Maybe, and certainly I would never dissuade somebody from getting a new boat, but it's not always the case. It's, you have to, the familiarity and the comfort with it is probably such a major factor in completing it
Yeah.
happily and with some sanity left over.
Yeah, and everybody's different. Some people really like those creature comforts and are really looking for a lot of space and luxury. Other
Sure.
people love camping and
Yeah.
we've had
Yeah.
people do it in a center console or in an open bow that they kind of had a canvas tent constructed on the bow, and that's where they would
Wow.
go and sleep. Whatever works, whatever, it is pleasure boating, whatever makes it pleasurable for you in a way that you can do it. And again, as long as you're safe and courteous, following all the regulations, the boat, of course, needs to be seaworthy. You do have some open water. You will be out in the Gulf of Mexico. The Great Lakes are no joke. They're not an ocean, but they can act like one.
Absolutely.
So, seaworthiness is, of course, very important.
No, always a great point. So I wanted to get a little more into your story. So you were the director of the AGLCA for a while before you actually you went out and completed the loop yourself. What can you tell me a little bit about your experience and maybe a couple of the things that surprised you? I feel like you were an expert going into this. Like that was a lot of pressure, but yeah. What
Yeah, it
surprised
actually
you
was
most?
some pressure. I had been a boater my whole adult life,
Right.
but had not completed the Great Loop until 2024. We actually started our loop in February of 2022, intending to finish. We started from Fort Myers, Florida, intended to finish by December of 2022, back to Fort Myers, Florida. But our winter home marina was destroyed by Hurricane Ian that year. So we didn't really have a place to go back to. So we meandered about the Gulf Coast for a little while, and 6 months or so went by and we realized hurricane season was coming again. So we spent the summer on the Tennessee River rather than have the boat in the hurricane zone during hurricane season, which is a fabulous side trip. And eventually worked our way back to the Gulf and officially crossed my wake in February of 24. So we spent about 2 years kind of total doing some meandering. Since then, we continue to live aboard. This summer, we took the boat back from Fort Myers all the way back up into Canada and did the Rideau Canal. And we did Lake Champlain on the way back south. So it's been a fabulous summer. And we're currently still on our way back to Fort Myers. But, after giving seminars about the Great Loop based on, I'll call it book knowledge, but, talking to many other loopers without the actual experience, the best way I can describe it is that it was more of everything than I expected, more than you can understand until you experience it. And I mean, by more, I mean the highs are higher, the lows are lower, the challenges are bigger, but the rewards are also sweeter than you think that they're going to be. So, take everything you think it's going to be and then magnify that. And that's the kind of ride you're on. And that's part of what makes it challenging, but part of what makes it just a great accomplishment. Both, it's a recognized accomplishment by friends and relatives and other boaters, but it's also very much a personal accomplishment to finish it.
Right.
So it's just really an experience like no other.
That's that's so well said. That's no, I'm feeling inspired. I like
We're gonna get you out there.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. But well, this has been really great. All the loopers I've talked to, and not just for this issue, which hopefully everyone will check out, but the different great loopers we've profiled over the years, they cannot say enough good things about the AGLCA. So just wanted to kick the floor to you for a second. I mean, it's amazing. I don't think I've ever met anybody who did the loop who wasn't just so appreciative of the community, the forum. So can you just give us tell us a little bit about your organization, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, it really is just a community. And we are fortunate to have a full-time staff of 4, which a lot of recreational boating associations don't have that luxury. So we're super fortunate for that, but it's ultimately the community that enables most of the things we do. We have a monthly virtual Docktails event that was just last night where we give 5 or 6, sometimes 7 topics for breakout rooms virtually. but it's our gold loopers, which are people who have finished the loop, that host those rooms.
Yeah.
We have a monthly digital newsletter that we send out on the 1st. And while we write some of the content ourselves, it's members who write that content. We've got a really active discussion forum on our website, and we've got, private members only Facebook group. Those are great to gain knowledge, but they're also great to build the relationships, because the loop really is all about the people. So even at our events, there's just a huge energy there because everybody's there passionate about the same thing. So it's not, the way I describe our events, everybody gets there and goes, gosh, this is really, it's so the energy. And I say, well, most of us came from a business background where if you were at a conference, it was because your boss forced you to go. Nobody really wants to be there. And everybody can't wait for the day to be over to, go do whatever else they're going to do in this nice city they're in. Exactly. Ours, everybody's there because they're choosing to be there. So everybody's more engaged in the seminars. Everybody's more making friends and really, I hate the word networking, but you're making those connections because you automatically have something in common with people. We offer a lot of benefits, but all of them come back to that community. And most of what we do, we couldn't do without our gold loopers staying involved and giving back.
That's really well said. I mean, I think one of the most daunting things that maybe stops people from doing the loop is this feeling of you're going to places you don't know. It's there's so much fear of the unknown. But I think when people get involved in your organization, they feel like, well, I'm not really alone. I've heard so many stories of, random people like the Peter Hages story. Somebody on the forum helped drive, a couple hours to get him a part he was needed, and it's just I think people feel reassured more than anything. It's like I'm. You have to solve many of your own problems, but you're truly never alone. And I think that's pretty special.
Yeah, that's true. And I think the boating community as a whole is like that, but I think loopers kind of take that up another notch. We do have a network of harbor hosts that members have access to. These are other members who volunteer to assist you when you're coming through their hometown. So there's between 500 and 600 of them around the loop. And, if you arrive somewhere and have an issue, it's a local point of contact. Anything from, receiving packages to where do I get my haircut to what's the best restaurant here? Or, often they'll give you a ride. I've had harbor hosts, lend me their car to go get something I needed if they couldn't go get it for me. No questions asked. Here's the keys to my Escalade. And I was like, wow. I'll be very careful. I promise. But it's interesting because you're never alone unless you want to be. There are plenty of secluded, quiet anchorages to enjoy. But when you need a resource, there are people there. And we had a member just last week, contacted me because they came across another looper in distress, had a mechanical issue, and they towed them to a safe place, got them to where they could anchor, and then reached out to me and said, you might want to check on these guys. I just, I dropped them there at a safe anchorage, but a tow can't get to them till tomorrow. So that's just the kind of a community it is. Everybody's looking out for each other and helping each other. Wow.
Well, this that really makes a lot of sense. And I wanted to plug your podcast for you because it's really educational, but I also find it to be really inspiring, even for boaters that aren't necessarily going to do the loop or doing the loop. Just hearing these stories about how people are out there using their boats and getting out of their comfort zone, I find to be very inspiring. So you don't need to be doing the loop. Please definitely check out your podcast. Is there, we'll just finish up with, what advice would you have? You've talked to so many loopers and so many people have done it. If somebody is on the fence and contemplating it or maybe dreaming about it, what advice would you have to that person?
So somebody who's on the fence, I would just definitely say get engaged with the looper community. It's not for everyone. As I said, it is challenging, and it can be challenging sometimes every day. So it's not for everyone. But the best way to decide is to get engaged with the community. And there's also no reason, of course, having the boat is a requisite, but there's really no reason your first long trip on your boat needs to be setting out on the Great Loop. Start small if you're not sure that this is for you. Do a couple weekends, do, a 2-week vacation, and just kind of build up to it until you're sure. And again, if you're on the fence, figure out what will make it comfortable for you?
I
Is
like
it a
that.
person that you want to be able to visit? Is it getting home to see the grandkids, which is completely possible on the Great
Hmm.
Loop because
Hmm.
you're never far from an airport? Is it a
Yeah.
hobby that you need to find a boat that can accommodate space for that hobby? But, look at what's got you on the fence.
Yeah.
And then find a way to give it a small try or to make it more comfortable for you. But again, the community is what it's all about. So get engaged and you'll get some good advice.
That's such a great point, and it's bringing me back to one of the last takeaways in putting this issue of ours together is that there's really like you said, there's no bad boat really unless it's too tall, but there's so many different ways to slice this trip. You would think it's one continuous loop that the experiences wouldn't be so different, but the way people break it up, maybe you take years and you take your time to experience different places, or you do it in 1 year or 2 years. There's really so many different ways to slice it for your whatever stage of life you're in. I think I've been learning more about that, and I think that's what makes it so much more appealing.
Yeah, traditionally the loop was done in about a year because there is a seasonality to it.
Sure.
Two people on a trawler in about a
Yeah.
year, and that was the
Yeah.
Great Loop. And
Yeah.
over time, people choosing it to do it in a way that they could make work has
Yeah.
really changed that to where
Yeah.
there's lots of information and resources on how to do it in segments. And that
Yeah.
we get asked all the time, can you do a podcast on segments? Well, yes, we can,
Hmm.
but segments can be so many different things that it gets really
Sure.
challenging.
Sure.
Some people are store the boat and come back for another segment. Some people, if they have a trailerable, they'll trailer it back. Some logistics start to factor
Yeah.
in when you're
Yeah.
talking about doing it in segments, but it's very doable.
Yeah.
The seasonality, your boat insurance may not allow you to be in the hurricane zone during hurricane season. So that is one thing for planning if you're doing segments. And everything in the northern part of the loop freezes
Mhm.
and you will have no access to services because they all close. So
Right.
that's what
Right.
causes the seasonality.
Yeah.
But other than that, as most of the canals operate 365 days a year. The New York and Canadian canals that get you from the East Coast to the Great Lakes have an operating season of usually mid-May to early October. But other than that, it's wide open as long as you have the access to the services you need. And you can get through the waterways without the canals in New York and Canada being closed for the winter.
Yep.
It's doable on whatever schedule you choose to make it.
Well, that's a really really great point. You mentioned the canals and especially the New York lock system, and I've been finding when I was kind of observing through your social media channels, you guys were an incredible resource for keeping people up to date on that information. So again, for anybody, for a serious boater, if you're contemplating the Great Loop or even just are an active cruiser, I would recommend checking those guys out. And this was really great. I'm yeah. Thank you so much,
I've
Kim,
enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on the podcast today. Everyone, check out the AGLCA and the December issue of Power Motoryacht, our first ever, as far as I know, Great Loop themed issue. So, Kim, thank you so much for your time. It was great having you.
Thank you. I'm super excited about the Great Loop issue. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Devotion that brings me down.